All right, so we'll make a left onto Route 1A, and that will lead us right into Holden, Maine.
Okay.
Oh, shoot, wait a second.
Oh, yeah, it looks like...
Yeah, it looks like there's a funeral procession coming through.
That's a lot of cars. I guess the deceased had a bunch of friends.
Well, we can only hope to have this many people attend our funeral one day.
I agree. And it's kind of apropos that we're stuck behind a funeral procession because we've come to Holden looking for a hearse.
Well, Jeff, we just found one, but it seems to be otherwise occupied.
No. The hearse we're looking for dates back a long time. Centuries. And this hearse may be cursed. They say if you wake up to find it parked on your lawn, someone in your family will soon die. Today, we're searching for the Hoodoo Hearse of Holden. Hi, I'm Jeff Belanger.
And I'm Ray Auger. Welcome to episode 238 of the New England Legends podcast. If you give us about 15 minutes, we'll give you something strange to talk about today.
Thank you so much for riding along with us as we chronicle every legend in New England, one story at a time. Most of our story leads come from you, like this one. Thanks to Lair Johnson for sending us an email. You know, we love it when you get involved with us. You can connect through our website, through our super secret Facebook group, which, by the way, is not the best kept secret anymore. We now have over 7,000 members, Ray.
Wow.
I know, right? Or, of course, you can call or text our legend line anytime, 617-444-9683.
Also, be sure to share our podcast with a friend or two. And we really appreciate it when you post a review of our show on Apple Podcasts. It helps others find us.
Okay, so before we go searching for this cursed hearse in Holden, we want to take just a minute to tell you about our sponsor, Nuwadi Herbals.
Now, if you've been listening to us for a while, you know that Nuwadi Herbals makes all kinds of all-natural teas good for your body and soul.
We've told you about some of our favorite teas that Ray and I have been enjoying ever since we were first introduced to Nuwadi Herbals. There's rootberry tea and strawberry moon, which are two household favorites at my home.
Now, don't forget about the healer tea when you're under the weather.
Or cloud walking tea before bedtime. Tox away tea for when you're trying to clean up from the inside. So many great tea flavors.
It makes you wonder, how many teas can they make?
Okay, so recently we slipped a recording device inside the Nuwadi Herbals secret lab where Rod Jackson develops their teas.
Rod, are you keeping a secret from me?
You caught me. I'm creating 2 new flavored teas.
Ooh, what are they?
I can't tell you. It's a secret. The big reveal's coming soon, though.
Babe, I need to know if you want labels on those new teas.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, but the legendary listeners will have to wait a little bit longer.
Okay, so we're going to be on the lookout for 2 new flavors of Nuwadi Herbal Teas. We'll have to stay tuned for the big reveal.
Let Nuwadi Herbals help support your healthy lifestyle. Check out the Nuwadi Herbals website to see all of their great products. And you legendary listeners, you get 20% off your order when you use the promo code LEGENDS20 at checkout. Visit NuwadiHerbals.com. That's Nuwati Herbals with an S.com.
All right, Jeff. Hearses are kind of creepy anyway.
Sure, it's the last ride our corpses take before we become worm food.
Well, there's that. I guess we can't help but feel our own mortality when we see one.
Yeah, no, it's no surprise those uneasy feelings may turn to worries of curses and things like that.
So how are we going to find this cursed Hoodoo Hearse of Holden, Maine?
Well, to find this hearse, we're going to have to head back to 1896.
It's late fall of 1896 here in the small town of Holden, Maine, just east of Bangor. Over in Bangor, a man has just died, and his family needs to get his body about 40 miles south of Bangor to Brooksville, Maine, on the coast.
Of course, when a loved one dies, you want to send them off in the finest way possible, and that means the Holden Hearse. It's historic, storied, and legendary in every way. It's the fanciest hearse around. It's large, polished, jet black. This horse-drawn carriage is the finest ride your deceased loved one can take.
And this hearse has been around for a long time. The hearse was built in England back in the late 1700s, so it's already more than a century old. The hearse came over to Massachusetts and immediately drew the attention of a public who was just dying to get a closer look.
Oh, I get it. Dying. Good one.
Sorry. So this large and fancy hearse carriage goes into service in Ipswich, Massachusetts, where it carts the deceased to their final burials. This hearse is in such high demand, it's earning revenues of close to $1,000 a year.
So we're talking big bucks.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Now, after 25 years of service in Ipswich, the hearse is sold to some business partners in New Wrentham, Maine, where it continues to gain attention and earn a lot of money for its owners. People from parts of Hancock and Penobscot counties have all purchased the services of this now iconic hearse. And then, in 1896, the town of Holden, Maine, purchases the hearse for $700 of local taxpayer money. Now, some locals also invest in the hearse because, of course, you still need to pay a driver and care for the horses that pull the hearse.
So here we are in November of 1896. There's already been 6 hearse drivers who have gotten old and passed away since this stately carriage went into service in New England just over a century ago. And now the 7th driver of this hearse has been asked to bring a casket from Bangor to Brooksville for burial.
When the driver finishes his delivery in Brooksville, he discovers the family of the deceased is too poor to pay his full fare. Now, when you consider the time, feeding and boarding the horses, plus boarding the driver, this trip is going to be a financial loss. So, the driver comes up with an idea. Brooksville is right on Maine's coast, so the driver purchases 600 pounds of salt codfish and uses the hearse to bring it back to Holden for sale.
Salt codfish is tough to get in the landlocked Holden, so the profits from the fish sale should help with the loss the driver just suffered. But when he arrives back in Holden, some locals are appalled. They're furious. Carrying a cargo of dead fish isn't just disrespectful, it's sacrilegious. How could he?
Oh, come on, man. I mean, aren't people overreacting here a little bit? Does it really matter he carried some fish back in the hearse?
It doesn't bother me, but you know how people are.
Sure.
One indignant person tells another, and suddenly this thing that isn't really a thing, well, it becomes a thing.
How so?
Okay. Some of the Holden old-timers send for the lawyers and update their wills to stipulate that their mortal remains will not be carried by this carriage that was sullied by codfish.
Okay, well, I get how that could be bad for business. I mean, having people put in their wills they don't want their family doing business with you.
But there's another problem.
What's that?
We need to understand a little about how the funeral business works. This hearse has contracts with 2 cemetery associations that stipulate that they will be the hearse company hired for any burials in those cemetery associations.
Oh, so the plot thickens.
Right. So if someone wants to be buried in one of those cemeteries...
And the deceased updated his will to say, don't use this specific hearse.
Exactly. Now we have a legal problem.
Gotcha.
If you want to be buried in a certain cemetery, you must use this hearse. If you don't want to use this hearse, then you have to find somewhere else to be buried.
And you need an alternate ride to that new cemetery. And that'll cost you.
There are some folks in town who can care less that codfish was once delivered inside this hearse. They're still willing to do business. But other Holden folks are stubborn. They're digging in. I mean, literally digging in. They start to fence off burial plots on their own land, so they won't need a cemetery or hearse. Thank you very much.
Holden is now divided into 2 factions, the pro-hearse and the hearse haters. The fight continues throughout the winter of 1897. Then, the courts rule on the contracts in favor of the hearse. I mean, a contract is a contract. A fish delivery should be inconsequential from a legal standpoint.
But this does nothing to settle the dispute. In fact, it's worth mentioning that no one from the anti-hearse families have died in the 6 months since the feud started. They're that stubborn about not wanting to have their corpse ride in a hearse sullied by codfish.
So stubborn they didn't die. So though the law is on their side, the fuss has caused enough problems that the town of Holden decides to retire their storied hearse and put it into storage. And so I guess that ends the feud.
Well, you think that would be the end, but it's not. There's still a rift in town.
Okay.
Some folks in Holden owned financial shares in that hearse. Others are still offended that their favorite hearse was ruined by transporting codfish in less than a year since it first went into service in town. That's when some of the boys of the hearse-hating side of town sneak into the old storage barn and wheel the hearse to the front lawn of a hearse-supporting family to be found the next day when the sun comes up.
Okay, so now it's a prank.
Sure, it seems harmless enough. But then the strangest thing happens. A few days after the hearse was left on the yard of this family, one of the family member dies.
Okay, but come on though, right? I mean, I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
Sure, probably just a coincidence.
A month later, some kids pull the same prank again. This time with a different pro-hearse family. still leaving it to be found in the front yard. And soon after, a member of that pranked family dies.
I mean, this is getting weird.
And the third time the prank is pulled? Now we're talking local terror.
Some suggest they burn up this obviously cursed hearse and be done with it forever.
But the pro-hearse faction of Holden is stubborn too. I mean, burning it up would be like giving in, losing, even though the hearse isn't in service anymore.
It's late one night when 5 of the anti-hearse boys from Holden steal the hearse again and start pushing it towards the next victim's home. But suddenly, the constable rides up and catches the boys red-handed. The boys appear before a judge who warns them if this hearse is moved again, it will be reform school for each of them.
Holden decides to paint this hearse, give it a fresh coat of paint, fresh varnish, and then they try to sell it for almost any price. But it's too late. Given the reputation, no one wants it. So the hearse stays put for good. And this story makes the wire service under the headline, The Hoodoo Hearse. And that brings us back to today. This week's story is pulled right out of the June 15th, 1901 newspaper article, and it was originally reported by the New York Sun newspaper.
I love the 2 sub-headlines of this article. An ancient vehicle that pointed the way to death in Maine, and bitter controversy over the use of conveyance for carrying codfish. Good health follows its ostracism.
They just don't write them like that anymore.
No, they don't. Do we know what happened to the hearse?
We don't. It's lost to history, which means likely enough time passed that it was either scrapped, destroyed, or any number of other things that can happen to, an obsolete antique.
That's too bad.
Now, when we think of cancel culture, it's easy to think of this as a modern problem, something brand new.
Yeah, it really isn't, though, is it?
No, some folks in Holden were offended. They boycotted the hearse, and they got it shut down. I mean, boycotts are powerful. We're seeing that now as the world reacts to Russia invading Ukraine. Sometimes we fight with our wallets.
This hearse definitely became a thing.
That it did.
It seems to me that carrying a load of codfish is a pretty minor infraction,
Sure.
though. But some folks got it in their craw that this was unforgivable, and that spread.
The hearse issue became such a thing that it was shut down and then cursed. You may argue that various people were old or sick and were going to die anyway, but it doesn't matter. Give something enough attention, whether positive or negative, and it becomes a legend.
I've never given so much thought to a hearse before in my life.
I get it.
But we're always thinking about our Patreon patrons.
We are.
These are our insiders, the backbone of what we do. For just $3 per month, they get access to new episodes plus bonus episodes and content that no one else gets to hear. If you want to become a bigger part of our family, head over to patreon.com/New England Legends to sign up.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Nuati Herbals, and our theme music is by John Judd.
Well, that was something.
Yes, cancel culture. It's such a hot button topic in politics today, and we're not going to get political because we're not qualified.
No.
But it's not new.
No, there's always a form of it. I think because of social media now, it's just easier to spread cancel culture.
Right, and so now we've got this whole microcosm. We've got the small town of Holden, and word spreads fast in a small town, right? Like can you believe they carried codfish?
Sure.
In the hearse? And honestly, I'm like, I don't care. I mean, if you heard the hearse that was going to carry one of your loved ones had brought a bunch of beer back from somewhere, you'd be like, right on.
I think it would give me pause.
Would it?
I'd be like, I mean, is this okay? And then I'd be like, all right, I guess it's not a big infraction.
Grandpa doesn't care.
No, he really doesn't. And I have my own beliefs anyway about that whole tradition. But I think I can see why people would wonder.
Isn't there a country song that says everybody's a celebrity at a funeral in a small town, right? Everybody, if they even knew you, they show up.
Yeah.
Right. And so funerals in a small town like Holden, especially back in the late 1800s, everyone in town went, even if you weren't close friends. Right?
Sure.
You went because it's an event. You have to be supportive. You want people to go to your funeral. There's a whole social network thing there. And so, of course, every funeral is a chance for everybody to gossip.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
For words to spread. See the hearse? They carried codfish in that, right?
I wonder if it became that telephone game where you whisper something to somebody, and before you knew it, it was Cape Cod potato chips. I don't know.
What else did they bring in there? If they brought codfish in there, what else have they done in
Yeah.
there? What horrible things? This is our love. This is sacred space.
We heard they don't bury the bodies; they just keep them in the hearse,
Just
and
keep
there's
them-
15 in them right there.
Yeah, you can't put grandma in there. I think it's fascinating that you had people sort of band together and say, we're voting with our wallets. We're
Yeah.
going to, put it in our will. We can't be put in that hearse. I'll be buried on my own property, which you lose revenue for the cemetery. And this whole thing spiderwebs until they're like, I mean, keep in mind, the town had just bought this thing. It was like less than 1 year old, and now they have to get rid of it.
And they were losing $1,000 a year on this. That's a lot of money,
Right. I mean, so you've got, it was in those days. Yeah, that was a chunk of change.
Yeah.
And so this town got rid of this brand new hearse, less than a year old, because someone carried codfish. I mean, it's insane. But at the same time, that's the reality of that town, right? And so I guess maybe the point is just like, yeah, sometimes you do vote with your wallet. Cancel culture, you may dislike parts of it when someone you like is getting canceled, but we all do it all the time in so many ways, whether you're choosing to boycott a certain brand of soda because they're still for sale in Russia, right? Or you're choosing to not do business at another place because of their politics or something they said. We do it all the time.
And then there's the other fact that somebody was trying to pull a prank. They were angry, but it was also at the same time, this is going to be really funny. This is going to be great. And this will scare them a little bit.
By the way,
and then
I think
somebody
it's hysterical.
died. But then somebody died.
Right.
And then what, you get the news at the next funeral. People are whispering, Did you hear the Murphys died? The hearse was on the lawn, and the guy's like, "Oh my God, we did that!"
Right, and then it happened again. And the reality, of course, is that elderly people die, sick people die,
Sure.
And it didn't have to be that day. It could have been like 3 weeks later, right?
Yeah.
But you're just like, remember the hearse was there. The hearse was there like 3 weeks ago, and 97-year-old grandma died.
And this is how legends start, by the way.
This is how they start. It only takes a couple, and then now everybody's spooked by this thing, and it's just that's it. It's too late, and it's just a hearse. It's just a vehicle, right, that you can put things in, whether it's dead bodies or codfish,
Sure.
or beer, or like any number of other things. And but it became a thing. Like it had a stigma. And there was no recovery. And I love that the town painted it. They're like, all right, put a fresh coat of paint on this thing, sell it. Like, if we break even, great. Even if we lose a little bit, whatever.
Yeah.
And that didn't work either. And all they could do is just move on from it because a legend, a story, destroyed a thing and canceled it.
It's a shame we don't know where it is.
Oh, I've thought about it. So, I mean, I did a little bit of digging, not as thorough as really we could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, if we got up to Holden, and it's one of those things where who knows? I mean, it could have just rotted away in someone's barn till they threw all the scrap away, or maybe it was eventually sold to someone and it's in some barn somewhere today. But like, how do you know?
But not knowing what is to come as far as how far the automobile will go.
Right.
Why would you save it?
Exactly.
This is not going to be a collectible someday. They'll just make new carriages.
By the early 1900s, yeah, like now you're starting to get into like motorized vehicles that became hearses. And then, yeah, at that point, you'd have to think to want to save an antique carriage, which is big.
Yeah.
Takes up a lot of space. And for what end? Right?
Those winters are cold. They probably just lit it on fire.
Probably. Or termites got to it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Any number of things. So it's been lost to time, which is unfortunate, but we still have the story and a reminder that cancel culture really isn't new. Till next time.
Remember, the bazaar is closer than you think.